Welcome to the Wellnest Mamas podcast. We are committed to leading a sustainable lifestyle and making community connections. In a world where stress and chaos seem to be the norm, finding balance and fostering a sense of true well-being is essential.
Whether you are just beginning your holistic wellness journey or are already deeply dedicated to the practice, this podcast is for you. Join the Wellnest Mamas as we uncover the secrets to holistic wellness and discover the power of building a healthy community that supports and uplifts one another.
Sit back, relax, and get ready to embark on a transformative journey to leading a sustainably healthy lifestyle. We're glad you're here.
Hey everybody, I'm Wellness Steph.
And I'm Caitlin, and today we've got Tori Hudson with us. She is a nutritional therapy practitioner. Tell me, Tori, that's a lot of words. What is that?
That is a great question. This was a program and certification I had never heard of before until I embarked on it, obviously. What really set it apart for me was that it is rooted and based in science. So many nutritional certifications and trainings have a little bit of science, but there are a lot of, motivational interviewing and kind of that, how do you get someone to really change their behavior, which is important. But I was like, I want the science. I want the nitty gritty. I want to understand the physiology of the body. And so when I stumbled upon this training, I was like, this is for me. This is what I've been looking for.
Awesome. How did you stumble on that? Where did you start to finish? How did you get to that point?
Yeah, that's a great question. So my degree is kinesiology, exercise science. So I've been in the fitness wellness world for a long time now and have probably tried all the things there are to try in terms of different types of workouts, different types of diets. And with the background that I had, I really kind of felt like I know it all. I know what I'm doing. Yeah, very cute. And I kind of started to find myself in a place where, despite doing all of these things, I was progressively feeling worse and worse. And, I was intermittent fasting. I was doing really intense workouts, 5-6 days a week. I was drinking coffee on an empty stomach every day. Black. Oh, yeah. Yep. I was, just like no rest, full calendar all the time, just like go, go, go. And I started to have just these different health problems arise that, looking back, it seems silly, but at the time I was like, how could this be happening to me? I'm doing, again, all the right things. I was exhausted all the time. I could drink a cup of coffee and then take a nap right afterwards. My hair was thinning. My periods were getting more painful every month. I was having like really brittle nails, hair, and among other things. And digestive problems were starting to show up. And about that time, I had a friend say, hey, have you heard of this podcast, this doctor, this kind of style of eating? At the time, it was called pro-metabolic, which I don't know if you've heard the phrase before. And really all that is a bioenergetic viewpoint where you're supporting your body on a cellular level. And it's largely based off of the work of Dr. Ray Peat. And I was hearing things like, you should be eating a lot more carbohydrates than you are. Why aren't you consuming dairy products? Even things like, your body needs sugar in the right form to run and to be fueled. And it was really a much different perspective than I had ever heard. But I was at a point where I was like, I'll kind of try whatever, So I started bringing breakfast back in and bringing in a lot of food groups that I had previously eliminated prior to that. I couldn't tell you why. I just wasn't eating them anymore. And over time, started really focusing on like mineral supplementation through my food, slowly eating more food, backing off on exercise. Again, kind of like all the things I felt scared to do. And a couple months in, my energy had skyrocketed. I was sleeping through the night. My cycles were getting much better. And this kind of approach to eating and nutrition that I was listening to on this podcast, one of the podcasters was a nutritional therapy practitioner. And I thought, wow, what is that certification? What she is saying makes sense to me. It's a viewpoint I've never really explored before. And not only that, but I'm feeling so much better from implementing these things. And so that was how I found out about the certification. And I did a 10-month program and became an NTP. Awesome. So yeah, that's how it took me there. So it's really focused on like foundational systems in the body. So understanding and supporting your blood sugar, your minerals, the quality of the food that you're eating, your hydration, managing your stress, looking at potential toxins that are showing up in your lifestyle. So it really dives into the sciencey side of those things and understanding the physiology of the body, and also taking into account just the person as a whole and looking at, you could be eating the right foods, but are you also very stressed all day long and have lots of toxins coming in different ways. So it's really a whole person, whole body approach that's rooted in science. And that's what I really love about it.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I hear what you're saying, because I feel like I've been down that rabbit hole where you feel like you're doing everything right and you just are putting yourself in this constant restriction, and it's actually unhealthy.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's exciting to hear that you can eat breakfast and
and still reach your goal, right? Eat breakfast. Yes. Yeah, and that's what I hear so much from clients too, is I mostly work with women who are, I would say, like 30 to 50-ish years old, and the common phrase is, I think I'm doing all the right things, but I feel terrible. And most people have a general understanding of, these are the foods I should eat more of, and these are the foods I should eat less of. But that's really just like a tiny sliver of the whole picture. And so we really dive into, not only the food that they're eating, but is it enough food? Are they getting enough micronutrients through their food? Are their blood sugars balanced throughout the day? Are they hydrating properly? All things that sound really simple, but most people have never been informed of the science of how those processes work in the body. And that's usually the missing piece, is they don't really understand like why breakfast is so important, for example. And it's a lot easier to not do something if you don't understand the importance behind it, I have found, for people.
So in your approach, do you do testing to assess, somebody's nutritional stance?
Yeah, we do a couple of different types of data collection. One of the big things that I do is HTMA testing, hair tissue mineral analysis. So this is also, I have found, not a widely used testing method, but I really love it because it reflects the mineral status of the body. Your hair is a soft tissue, and your body stores minerals in soft tissues in your body. And so when we take a hair sample, we see the reflection of mineral status, metabolic type, and heavy metals present in the body. And that is a reflection of the previous about 90 days. So you kind of get to paint a picture of what's been happening in the body versus blood work, which is just really what's happening in that moment on that day, which has a time and a place. But when I have women come to me with, some severe signs of metabolic dysfunction, we want a bigger, clearer picture of what's going on, more so trends and stories that the body is telling than just an isolated incident. So I use the HTMA test, which is a hair sample. We do a food journal. We do a nutritional assessment questionnaire, all at the beginning of our time together to really assess what's happening internally, what are you doing on a daily basis, and how are those choices impacting these bigger foundational systems in the body, and how is that tied to the symptoms that you're experiencing on a daily basis.
Heavy metals can you find in hair? Like, that's interesting to me.
Yeah, aluminum, mercury, cadmium. Mercury and aluminum are probably the top two that I see show up. I always think of a client that I had where her mercury was pretty high, and she was like, oh, I used to eat canned tuna like it was going out of style. Yeah. Or, if aluminum, if someone if they like cook with a lot of aluminum foil, or maybe they have fillings, like old fillings, those used to have aluminum in them. So it can show up in a number of ways. And when your body lacks the necessary micronutrients to detoxify, it holds on to those heavy metals. And so usually when we do a hair test, we set some foundational action steps in place based off of that. And then when we retest 3 to 6 months later, you start to see those levels come down as the body becomes more supported and has more of those resources to get rid of them.
Wow.
That's so fascinating. That just made me think of this big study that I read about lead, and historically what lead, when you're nutritionally sound and getting all of those micronutrients, it flushes out of your body. And that's when they started fortifying cereals and things like that, because lower income people were not getting the nutrients that they needed. And so they were subsidizing the nutrients in the cereals and all of this. And so that's how all of that happened. It was like lead poisoning.
That's
but
so interesting.
But that just like totally reminded me of that. It was,
I didn't know that.
So,
yeah, it's really wild. I think a lot of times when people think about like detoxing anything, they think that, supplements and protocols and labs are necessary, and sometimes they are. Sometimes they lend a lot of insight, but if your body isn't foundationally supported, like on a nutritional basis, it can't detox the way that it's meant to. And so that's what I just focus on, is like those foundational priorities with clients before getting into tons of supplements and tons of labs. And it's kind of just like throwing gasoline on a fire if you don't focus on.
It can be really overwhelming.
Yeah,
if you come home with a bucket of pills, you're like, I don't know what to do with this.
And it's like exciting for like 2 weeks, and then you're like, I can't take all of these supplements.
absolutely.
So do you feel like you get better results from food, like just, like your nutrition, like rather than taking a capsule with, I don't know, iron in it or something? You would prefer to see somebody have a iron-rich diet?
Yes, absolutely. I think food first is my approach always. I do bring in supplements when necessary, but I think the 3 biggest areas that I see with clients is that their blood sugar is extremely imbalanced. They aren't eating nearly enough food, and especially the macronutrients are very skewed. They aren't getting enough, carbohydrates. They're eating way too much fat. That impaired and irregular intake of those foods is impacting how their body makes energy, and they're lacking enough micronutrients. And that is what's causing, I would say, 90% of symptoms that people are experiencing on a daily basis, which I think is great news, because to correct those things, it's not super complicated, right? It doesn't require a total upheaval of your life or your budget, or just your mental load, I guess.
Is there a simple way that you can get more micronutrients? Like if, I don't know, your average Joe, like what's the easiest way?
Yeah, I think there's a few different approaches. I think eating locally is a huge one. When we think about food that is in the grocery store, we don't know how long it's been sitting on the shelf. We don't know how long it traveled to get there. If it was maybe sitting in heat for a long time or anything like that. All of those things are going to impact the micronutrient profile of that food. And while everyone, of course, is going to shop at a grocery store, the more you can go to your local market, farmer's market, and get things that they picked that day or the day prior, the micronutrient profile of that food is going to be much richer than something that's been sitting in the grocery store. I know that's not always accessible where people are, but that's one really easy way to do that. And then the second one I would say is not everybody's favorite, but if you can include like some type of organ meat in your diet, even once or twice a week, that is like nature's powerhouse of nutrients. I read one time that 4 ounces of liver is nutritionally equivalent to eating 4 to 5 pounds of fruits and vegetables.
Wow.
It's just loaded with micronutrients. So, you know, mixing liver up in your ground beef for burgers or lasagna or meatballs or whatever.
Is that the best way? You're like hiding it in other...
Yeah. If you like
Unless you
eating
love
liver and
liver
onions,
and
more
onions.
power to you.
I loved it when I was little. I don't think anybody else in my house would appreciate it.
Yeah,
if I was
I
like,
tried
guess what?
it, but
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know if I could do this on like a weekly basis.
I went to this restaurant in New York and I had liver and onions, and it was the best. It was so good,
bet.
and I dream about that all the time. And I wonder if it was because my body was like, there was so much nutrients in that liver. You know?
Oh my gosh, that's funny.
Pate is a great way
yeah.
to do it. Make like a liver pate, chicken liver pate, put it over, you know, some toast with jam or something like that. That's a much more palatable way sometimes too for people to consume.
I ordered some emu livers and ostrich livers because I have alpha gal, so I have to alternative. But emu and ostrich are like 27% more nutrient dense than beef. So I wonder what their livers are. Just eat emu and ostrich liver, you'll be fine.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
It's really cool. It's, you know, I when I tell clients about it, I feel like they're either like, okay, or they're like, no, absolutely not. It's not going to be for everyone, but if you can find ways to sneak it in a few times a month, you're going to be filling a lot of gaps that would otherwise be pretty hard to get through just eating, you know, pounds of fruits and vegetables every day. Absolutely.
Wow.
Those definitely seem like very simple, manageable things to integrate in. I think it's always so much easier to integrate in than take away.
Yes,
That's
absolutely. And
So are you like anti-restriction? Like, you don't say like no dairy, no...
No.
Cool.
No, I think if you can tolerate, you know, a certain food group, and it doesn't irritate you or upset you in any way, that I don't believe you should be restricting any food groups. There are, I think, more beneficial foods that are easier to obtain nutrients from, that, you know, looking at it from that perspective, it would be more beneficial to consume XYZ versus XYZ. But I always like to frame it as, you know, I would never tell someone to not go out for pasta on Friday night or not to get ice cream with their kids in the afternoon or anything like that. But what we're working around is how can we do it in a way that's just more supportive to your body, right? Like if you go out for Italian food and get a bowl of pasta, and that is like your weekly ritual with your best friends that you couldn't ever give up, go on a 10-minute walk afterwards. That is going to significantly blunt the spike of blood sugar that happens after a carb-rich meal. Or have a little starter salad before you have your pasta. Those vegetables before a carb-heavy meal also help slow down the absorption of the sugars from the carbs. So I never try to frame it as like, well, that's gotta go, sorry. But more so just, again, like, how can we understand what your body's doing with it? And can we add in things to make this more supportive and less stressful for your body to react to, if that makes sense.
That's very,
Makes a lot of sense.
What do you think about continuous glucose monitors?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think there's a time and a place for them. Largely, I think a lot of those things are silly. I think if you have, a serious health problem that you're trying to monitor, absolutely bring in additional tools. I think they can be fun to experiment with sometimes, but I think that how we feel on a daily basis can lend us a lot more insight than a lot of these new gadgets and hacks and tools that are out there. I think my observation is that women have become very disconnected from their bodies and from what food is doing for them or maybe against them. And they're not really tuned into, when I eat this, I feel XYZ. And we maybe sometimes rely too much on these external factors to tell us how we're feeling. And again, I think there's a time and a place, but I think getting connected to what our food is doing for us and how it translates is much more impactful than some of these things. For example, I have a recent client of mine was kind of experimenting with the amount of carbohydrates she was eating. And when she was eating more, she noticed that she was sleeping so much better at night. And unintentionally, she kind of fell off how many carbohydrates she was eating. And a few days later, had a little light bulb moment of, oh, my sleep has gotten worse the last week or so. I've also not been eating as many carbohydrates. She added them back in, and her sleep improved again. Versus a mindset of, maybe I just need melatonin to help me sleep through the night. There's nothing wrong with that, but it lacks the connection of, is my food supporting me the way that it can and it should if we know how to use it properly.
That's so fascinating.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, we learned at the perimenopause mini retreat we did about how cortisol spikes in the middle of the night, and all those, your liver shoots out sugar in the middle of the night, and that can wake you up. So that makes sense. If you weren't having as much carbs to kind of hold you over, your body's like, hey.
Yes.
I got you. Don't worry.
And those complex carbs are the brain fuel. So during restoration.
Yes, exactly.
Makes perfect
For my
sense.
clients who have trouble sleeping, one of my first recommendations is adding in a snack before bedtime that is going to be a little bit more carb heavy, because usually what's happening is your liver is using glucose to do its 700 plus jobs while you're sleeping. And when it doesn't have enough glucose from your intake that day, your body releases stress hormones. It's very smart to wake you up, to prompt you as hello, we're out of fuel, we need some more. And we're usually I have to go to the bathroom again at 2 a.m. But there's a physiological mechanism happening there that is actually saying we're out of fuel. In Chinese medicine, that 1 to 3 a.m. is actually called liver hour. Yeah, super interesting. And so sometimes if someone is having trouble falling asleep, staying asleep, adding in, a glass of milk before bed, or, having some cheese and popcorn or whatever it may be, something that has a good balance of macronutrients in it, is really supportive for helping them sleep through the night better. It's pretty amazing how instantaneous it can be.
That's going to be very helpful, I think, for a lot of our listeners. That's probably one of the main complaints we hear is I'm not sleeping.
Yes,
absolutely.
And I can't have that.
No. Yes, and so many people are just accepting of it, of I just don't feel good, and that's just kind of the way that it is. And I think that we really are just not educated enough on how much control we do have over how our body functions, and we're not just victim to our age or anything like that.
Yeah, thank goodness.
Thank
goodness. So recently you came into the shop to host one of our nesting hour series, and that was so cool. I really loved learning with the group of women that were there, and you touched specifically on pregnancy nutrition. Is that like one of your loves, is talking about food during pregnancy?
It has started to be. Yes. It was, it's definitely a topic that I've started to focus a lot more on over the last year with clients. I was previously, under the impression and perspective that pregnancy just kind of happens to you, and cross your fingers, hopefully it's not too bad, best of luck. And the more, I started to think about having a family and moving into that chapter of life, just the more research I started to do on it. And I've learned that a lot of pregnancy symptoms, not all of them, of course, but a lot of them are largely driven by our health status before we get pregnant. So things like nausea, morning sickness, muscle cramps, heartburn, acid reflux. We might all experience some variations of that throughout pregnancy, but when those things become extreme and when they become something that's kind of dictating how our day goes, usually it's tied back to, again, what our metabolic health was like before we conceived. And so I've started to kind of focus more on working with clients in that preconception phase of how can we prepare your body to move into this season of life so you can have an enjoyable pregnancy and your body can be supported as you move into labor and postpartum. And it's been really fun kind of exploring that area of nutrition with women as well.
Cool.
Oh, that's really neat. So how do people work with you?
Yeah, great question. So I have a few different packages that I do with clients. I have a 4-month program, and then I have a 1-month support where we do an HTMA test. During that 4-month program, we run an HTMA at the beginning, do all that other data collection that I mentioned, and create a structure and a game plan for what that 4 months looks like, and tailor all of that data to those action steps every month with them. For someone who might be just kind of experiencing some less than desirable health symptoms, but otherwise they're like pretty on track with a lot of other things, the 1 month of support is great because we run an HTMA, we do a food journal, we get some data, and we can do that deeper dive and send them on their way with some applicable recommendations to target what they're feeling. So those are the two main ways that I work with clients.
And how can we contact you?
Yes, my website is just torintp.com. So it's pretty simple.
Yep. ToriNTP.com. We will drop a link down below in the comments.
And is it virtual? How do you?
Yes, I meet with clients in person and virtually as well,
Okay.
largely virtually. I have clients all over the country, but for local people, I meet with them in person too.
Cool.
Love it.
So do you have anything coming up for the community? Any like exciting workshops or anything in the works and the thoughts?
Are you going to come back and see us
Yes,
at nesting hour?
hopefully another nesting hour presentation. Nothing in the works right now, as I will have a baby in a few months here.
That's so exciting.
But my website does have several great resources on it as well. Some different guides, webinars, things like that. I have a bi-monthly newsletter as well where I just send out, information on different topics on women's health. So there's always information coming out in some way or another for people to take advantage of.
That's wonderful. Yeah, go sign up for that newsletter.
I'm gonna go.
Can't wait to hear more. And congratulations.
Thank you.
Hope everything goes very smoothly.
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.